So we're chatting with Paul Rowe from the Cornerstone community here in Dubbo. Mate, tell us a bit about the history of Cornerstone.
Well, it began as a friendship back in 1973 with a mate in Sydney when I was a student. Laurie McIntosh was my mentor. He kind of gave me kind of a substantial framework for my faith, and as we grew in doing things together, about 1978 we decided to try and do the same for other young people who were probably at that stage of rethinking their faith or trying to work out whether it was true. So we decided, Laurie was at Burke, we decided, well, we tried this wildcat scheme of having a community living on a farm where you could work half the day and then study half the day, and that would pay your way, but the work would actually be part of the training. So that was the genesis of it. It was a pretty wild scheme. But in the 27 years we were in Burke, we saw 1,500, 2,000 young people come through from all over the world, and who were subsequently doing good stuff all over the world. So that was its beginnings.
And then you're in Dubbo now. How many others are there? Not
many left in Dubbo now. Like Dubbo, Cornerstone's shifted its focus to more of an internship model. We found that running the campus with, we got to having a registered training organisation and all that sort of stuff, but we found it was just far too stringent and too many hoops to jump through, and we felt there were more and more groups doing that. And we went back to our beginnings of concentrating on discipling, mentoring and teaching and modelling, so living together and for them to catch it by infection. That was the beginning, like the socialisation model of education. So that's kind of, we've gone back to our roots really, and sort of we found ourselves running a lot of businesses and big campuses, and all that sort of stuff became very demanding, and you needed a very high level of commitment and a fair level of skill to keep all that running. And we probably became too top heavy with all that, and so they've kind of reduced it to a more streamlined model, I suppose you'd say, where it's more, so they live in a town, a group of staff are there, they take in about half a dozen to 10 students and disciple them in situ, so they teach, do missional kind of stuff together.
And one of your well-known students is Colin Buchanan. What was he like?
We don't like to talk about Colin, really. He was just a pest, really. Actually, I wasn't in Burke when he came to Burke, and people said that was just as well. But, I look at what Colin's done worldwide now, I suppose, but in just simply teaching children alone, that what he's done in embedding the Bible in kids and making it a heap of fun. And, he's done it amazingly well. And no, I have the greatest respect for what he's achieved. All really, it's amazing.
Well, I love the whole idea of living in community that you've fostered over the years. I've had the privilege of visiting the Bruderhof community in Inverell, and, Sherwood Cliffs, the drug rehab in Coffs Harbour, they live in community there. The Rito drug rehab in Brisbane, they live in community there. And there's something about living in community that it's 24/7, 365. It's true discipleship, I would say. It's what they did in the book of Acts. They shared together every day. And in the 2019 in the church, a lot of people turn up on a Sunday morning, maybe a home group, maybe they'll help out at some other ministry during the week, but we get a couple of hours together each week. How can we learn to live in community better in 2019?
That's a good question. I think, actually, I was at a Bible study this week. We were talking about Acts chapter 4, where they had, sold up things and had in common. And there was an Indian doctor there who said, "Nobody does this anymore." And I said, "Well, actually, we've had a go at it. It's not easy, and it does take. Living in a materialist and driven Western society takes a fair bit of courage to step away from that, I think. So, and you have to find a group of like-minded people who've got the same sort of strengths and want to make it happen. and are willing to pay a price, I think. So it's definitely costly. But then, like when we drove away from Burke, my wife and I, we looked at each other and said, well, we haven't got much in terms of resources, but I feel like I'm leaving Burke one of the wealthiest men in Burke because of what I'd seen happen in all those students' lives. So it depends on a worldview that you develop, really, Matt. Yeah, I think that if you really decide that the kingdom of God is the issue, and if it's true, then to listen to what Jesus said, come and follow me, and then to work out how to do it. And I'm not saying we got it right. Some people would say we were too optimistic. There'd be people who say, it didn't work because it's sort of reduced now. In some ways, we don't have the same sort of physical apparatus. But no, I've got no apology for it. I think I'm glad we've done and are still doing what we're doing. There's still a group of us here. And a lot of people who've looked at, like you said, who've looked at what we've done, and this isn't sort of big noting, but they've just made the same observation that this is the common purse thing that we did was fairly strenuous. When I went on the pension a few years ago, I laughed because I'm probably one of the few people who got a raise.
Right, there you go.
I think that they said the common purse thing was what gave it its distinctive, that you actually did live in community and shared life and took the risks together and were willing to do without. And and again, I'm not trying to sort of make myself into St. Francis or something, but it just does take. Well, my brother sitting next to me here, Brother Frank, he lives in a caravan on the riverbank. I mean, he's done it more than me, actually. He's lived a very simple and humble life.
Well, it's been so good to catch up with you, and I've heard lots of great stories about Cornerstone over the years, and great to meet one of the guys behind it. And wonderful to hear your story. Thanks for joining us today. God bless.
Well, thanks, Matt. That's another surprise. I beg your pardon for not